Okay, we're going to get started. Thanks for listening, everybody. My name is Jack Haskell. I'm the Trail Information Manager, and I'm going to be running this webinar with Beth Boyst right here. Welcome to the class of 2020. Just briefly, we're going to do introductions, and then Cassidy, we have a question and answer feature, and Cassidy Barkalow, Trail Information Assistant, is in another room running the question and answer. So you'll see on your screen that you can submit questions. Please go ahead and do that, and she'll be answering them live. And then as we have time at the end, we will also be answering some of those questions. Broadly, we're going to speak until about 7:30. And we've 15 minutes at the end for those questions. Our focus is on your time on the trail, right? We're sending you off to have a wonderful summer or spring out on the PCT. We're going to talk about safety, then leave no trace, and then some other advice as well. So I'm going to introduce Liz Bergeron. Liz is my boss at PCTA. She's the Executive Director and CEO.
All right, thanks Jack for the introduction. It's exciting to be able to talk with all of you. Of course, I'd rather see you in person, but I guess this is the next best thing, and we've learned to take full advantage of technology here at PCTA. So at PCTA, our work is about ensuring that the trail is there for you. To put it in very simple terms, of course, we want you to have a great experience on your upcoming journey. And when we talk about our work, we talk about the trail experience, not just the trail itself. I pretty much get asked every week or every other week if I've hiked the PCT. And the reply is yes. I've hiked over 1,300 miles, and I plan to continue my section hikes and hike many more miles, including some trips planned for this summer. And I've had an incredible time out there on the trail, and I've met hundreds of PCT hikers, and it's really one of the more enjoyable parts of my job is getting to talk with you and to hear your experiences. Just 2 weeks ago, actually when I was in Washington, D.C. for advocacy work called Hike the Hill, I met a thru hiker from the class of 2003. And he refers to his hike as one of the best life experiences he has ever had. And he said that every week he thinks about his PCT experience in one way or another. And I thanked him for sharing that with me, for sharing his story and his experience, because it's really motivating to know that the work we're doing at PCTA is having such an impact on people's lives. So that was really cool. So our work involves lots of different activities, monitoring policies to ensure the trail remains viable. We provide trail information. We connect with so many different members of our incredible community. So trail information such as today's webinar, and we also manage and make possible our PCT volunteer program. And it's through this program that we're able to maintain the trail and keep the trail open and passable for all of you and everybody who gets to use the trail, whether it's for a day or a weekend or a thru hike like you're about to embark on. We also help buy land to secure the trail. Part of the trail still remains on private property, and we basically have permission to pass on those private parcels. So on your journey, you're going to walk part of the trail on private property. And in Northern California, you're going to walk part of the trail on newly acquired property, which is now owned by the U.S. Forest Service. We completed this project in 2019. We refer to it as the Trinity Divide. So I hope to meet some of you this year when I'm out there, and I also hope to sign many of your completion certificates. It's another fun part of my job. When you complete your journey, I hope you apply. So have a great time out there. And Beth Boyst is up next.
Hi, everyone. I'm Beth Boyst. I work for the United States Forest Service. I'm based in Vallejo, California, and I have the fabulous job of being the Pacific Crest Trail Administrator, which means that I really get to work with all aspects of PCT management, from working with PCTA and volunteers to land acquisition to thinking about power lines and pipelines and projects and trying to figure out how to minimize impacts. The heart and soul of the PCT is our volunteer community. And I just want to be sure that you all know that your efforts totaled to over 106,000 volunteer hours in 2019 up and down the trail. And that equates to about $2.7 million worth of contributions to protecting the trail. So it's a heartfelt thank you and a really important piece of our work together. So the other thing that is important to think about as you do this journey is hike your own hike. And what you get from this experience is really what you seek in many ways. And so a day hike is just as important on the trail as a long distance through hike. They're all valid and important experiences. And so the PCT is indeed a place or a platform even to think about as a place to have a change, whether it's in a moment or in a full season of how you think about time and space and use that time. Stuart Udall was the Secretary of the Interior in the 60s, and he has a quote that I really wanted you all to hear tonight. "A national trail is a gateway into nature's secret beauties. It's a portal to the past, a way into solitude and community. It's also an inroad to our national character. Our trails are both irresistible and indispensable. So as you start your journey, I hope you have plenty of time to explore, to create and connect community, and to see those dramatic and inspiring landscapes of the Sierra and Cascade Mountain ranges."
Thanks, Beth. So a little bit more about me. My name is Jack Haskell. My trail name is Found. I had the honor of through hiking the PCT in 2006. Beth, you didn't mention your hiking experience.
I did not. Sure, I'm an AT. I've completed all of the AT a very long time ago. My trail name was Mud, Sweat, and Tears, which made me think that I was safe if people thought three of us were traveling together, but I was actually solo. And then I started in the Mexican border in 1991, and I've made it to the halfway point of the PCT. So I still have a few more miles to go, but I certainly plan on finishing.
You've walked a long way for sure. So trail name Found, I think I said that, and I've had the honor for 9 years now of being a resource for the general public at the Pacific Crest Trail Association. I help answer the phones and your emails. I help facilitate the long distance permit. I work on educational programs, the store, social media, wide variety of things that really are to help you all get out, enjoy the trail, and have a great experience. I'm not just a PCT alumni, but I continue to be an avid backpacker, have been since I was a little kid. So what we're going to talk about is informed by our own personal experience on the trail and years between the two of us of listening to others about the patterns, researches, fellow managers, Center for Leave No Trace Ethics, things like that. The picture you see right here is classic day 2 on the Pacific Crest Trail. You all might think you might be heading to sunny Southern California, but be prepared. There's this intrinsic risk in the wilderness. You're responsible for your own safety, and it starts on day 1. I have hiked the southern miles a bunch of times now, maybe 6 or 7 or 8 different times. And I can't tell you how often I've had to put socks on my hands. This isn't a photo of me, but it's a common experience. It gets cold down there, or it might be really, really hot. Okay. So right off the bat, you're in a wild and challenging experience. And I know that a fair number of you are leaving pretty soon. Some of you are leaving like in a week, some in a couple of months. There is not all that much time left to prepare. And make sure that you have a good rain jacket, a pack cover, are taking it seriously, because that cold, wet, rainy, even snowy weather is pretty darn common in March and April in San Diego County. And it continues to be a challenging experience that you're choosing to do for the rest of your hike. So right off the bat, we need to talk about drink water. And that piece of advice has to be backed up with don't drink too much water. At this point, I really hope that many of you have taken wilderness first aid classes. I know that I've taken probably 10 of them, and it's been invaluable to me. So I want to encourage you to drink water, because dehydration is a real risk, and heat stroke and heat illness are real risks. But I know that for years, outdoor professionals have emphasized the need to drink water in the desert. And what we've really learned in the Grand Canyon, but also on the Pacific Crest Trail, is that drinking too much water is its own problem. It's called hyponatremia, or water sickness, and it has similar signs and symptoms to heat stroke and heat exhaustion, but it can't be treated with drinking more water, right? The problem is that low sodium levels in the blood. So I bring this up, I wanted to emphasize it right off the bat, because I want you to hear that you need to drink a lot of water. And we've had some PCT thru hikers suffer from drinking too much water and that sodium imbalance. So stay hydrated. The second part of this slide is all about heat. And the key with this is you might become discombobulated. You might have lightheadedness, or you might see somebody else with symptoms like muscle cramping, nausea. Whatever it is, the goal is to cool people down and watch out for each other when you're out there.
So Jack, I was just thinking that one of the things that's important, and I see that you've got it up here in terms of distance traveled, but y'all should be sure to know that there's not water all along the PCT. There are some dry stretches. There may be more dry stretches depending on how the snowmelt happens. And so really being responsible in terms of understanding what the water sources are is another really important piece of the puzzle.
It's critical. It's that reliable information piece of it. You need to walk with enough water between reliable water sources. So multiple good sources of information, from guidebooks like Wilderness Press and the Mountaineers, to the PCT water report that relies on you all sending in reports, and that's open for everybody to use. And then there are some apps like Guthook, a paid app, that is another good place for water information, but it's not, you have to have an account to get that info. So walk between reliable water sources. We're asked a whole lot how much water you should carry. And I talk about that in terms of having the capacity to carry a lot of water. It's going to depend upon what the distance is, your personal physical fitness, the temperature of the day, miles traveled, and all of these other things. But know that most of us don't have significant desert hiking experience on day one, and we acclimatize. So you acclimatize to the heat and you acclimatize to the exertion, you acclimatize to the trail. Be cautious at the beginning with it. It's hard to give general recommendations because I know that there's more than 40 different countries flying to the PCT in the next couple of months. And that's pretty amazing, right? And some of you have previous through hiking experience or are ultra marathon runners. Some of you are not, right? And the dry stretches aren't, it's not easy, right? It's okay if all sections of the PCT aren't within your comfort level or within your skill level or your physical fitness level. I will tell you that on a very hot day, it's not within my risk tolerance to go hike 30 miles without water, right? It's not appropriate for most of us. So be self-sufficient and plan without relying on anybody else. And that includes, don't rely on water caches. Back when I thru hiked, there was a couple of hundred people and the water caches could go dry even then. Now that there's a few thousand people, it's a huge effort to imagine that volunteers, informal volunteers, not associated with PCTA, are really able to stock dozens of water caches. It's just not realistic. And if you arrive at one of those and it's empty, you made a choice and you've put yourself in a really difficult situation. So please don't rely on those water caches.
They're also a source of litter sometimes once those bottles get empty. And so really planning on reliable water sources is the best way to travel.
Yeah. And the water situation is probably going to be pretty normal, which means normal dry stretches, but it's not looking like an extreme year in Southern California for you all. I do want to welcome and be a little bit more inclusive of southbounders. I know that some of you emailed saying that you would be listening to this, and also section hikers, and we probably have some Trail Town members and volunteers and lots of different types of people watching us right now. So we will have some information that's targeted and relevant to you southbounders. And really, hello, thanks for being here. So this is another slide that's really about staying safe from environmental factors. It's common, right? People are worried about bears and mountain lions. There's a lot of discussion of that. And there's the bad plants, the poisonous plants out there that could ruin your day or your week or your whole hike. And I use this as an introduction to risk management. As an outdoor adventurer, I am exposing myself to risk, right? The things that I do are inherently somewhat dangerous. Climbing a mountain, boating a river, going on a thru hike is an extreme form of hiking. And it's important for me to have information so that I know what the challenges are and I can manage those risks. So up here, we've got a picture of one of the more common risks. It's poison oak. Californians and a lot of you West Coast people know what this looks like. Everyone else, Google these things. You should know what poison oak looks like. You should know what poodle dog bush looks like. Learn to identify them. Point of it is stay away. They're pretty nasty. They will ruin your trip. And we will get more into protecting your food. Beth, we'll got a whole slide on that. For animals, be aware of your surroundings and keep your distance. I love seeing bears. I would love to someday see a mountain lion. And when I do see these animals or a rattlesnake, don't approach it, stay away. You will almost definitely see a bunch of rattlesnakes out there. So keep your distance, keep an earbud out or even both earbuds out if you're really hoping to get more value out of a nature experience and learn what to do in your first aid classes, or if at this point you haven't taken a first aid class, maybe buy a wilderness first aid book or look at YouTube for some detailed advice from first aid experts.
So we first started seeing poodle dog bush after some fires on the Angeles National Forest. And what y'all need to know is that it has a purple flower that's actually quite beautiful. And so do take the time to learn the plant, and it causes blistering. And we've had crew, volunteer trail crew folks that have had to be sent to urgent care to be treated after exposure. So take it seriously. It's a force to be reckoned with.
And it's a fire follower. So we first learned about it after the station fire, and the station fire has been enough years. So some of it's died back, and really PCTA volunteers have gone out and cleared a bunch of it so that you can have a safe and great experience. But there's new wildfires every year. So it wasn't as pervasive in the past couple of years, but I don't know whether it'll be a new problem in a new place this coming year.
So let's talk about navigation and how to go north or south. When I hiked the AT a long time ago, I thought about it in left and right terms. That doesn't work very well, and I would not suggest using that. Smartphones are great. So the apps are certainly a good way to start to understand where you are, but they're not the only way. And we really do want to emphasize to you all that being able to navigate with a map and a compass is really important. So the obvious things like you could lose your battery may be pretty straightforward, but there's other things that you may not think about. Search and rescue or any kind of emergency contact, those folks don't orient to the mile on the PCT that you were at. So if you call San Diego County Search and Rescue and tell them that you're at PCT mile 20, that doesn't mean anything to them. So you really do need to be able to give a lat and a long and to share with people where you are. The other thing is that I walked into a fire as well on my 91 hike, and I could see that fire from a long way away, and I knew that it was there. And I had visited with the dispatch on where the fire was, and they had said it was safe to go ahead. But it turned out that the fire jumped the river and actually was below me as I was trying to descend into Belden, California. And I didn't know where to go because my map itself was only the narrow PCT. And so thinking about understanding the broader context of where you are is also a really important part of navigation and orientation. We have some new National Geographic maps that PCTA has worked with National Nat Geo to create, and those are a great choice in terms of a hard copy map to navigate with.
Yeah, that's a good example of the fire. I carry maps and I like looking at them because it sort of enriches my experience. I now know what mountain range I'm in, the peak, the valley's name. I stare at them for hours when I'm in camp, but really my map and my compass, that's my compass up on the screen, sit in my backpack most of the time. I really don't need them until something goes wrong. And when something goes wrong, that's when you are backstopped with the fundamentals of wilderness travel, right? It's in emergencies. It's when there's a fire and you need to understand where the side trail is, or it's when your brother is having a medical emergency and you need all the information you can have. So one nice thing about the Nat Geo maps is that they're so compact and easy to just stick in your bag and not use. If you're going to rely on your smartphone, you still have pretty lightweight thing that is just as important as your sleeping bag, just as important as the other fundamental skills and tools of wilderness travel. So,
let's
this is
talk
you
about,
again. Yeah.
Let's talk about snow. So this time last year, I remember getting phone call after phone call of what's the snow going to be? And so I love these graphs that are the snow water content for California over a series of years. It looks like 76 is the first earliest year, and then it goes all the way up through 2018. And what I can tell you, and what this graph really demonstrates, is there's no typical year, right? We've had some extremes, really high level snowpack, 2017 and 19, but we don't really know what this year is going to be. Our projection and looking at the long-term forecast is that it'll be less than last year in California and equal or a little bit more perhaps in Washington. But we really won't know until April. And so I'd encourage you to look at PCTA's websites on trail conditions. It's a good place to look at the snow reports. Plan for winter travel. You definitely will probably see some snow. I saw snow in August last year, and I was only at 7,000 feet, and there was still snow. So be prepared to be flexible with your trip, and know that you can always skip a section if it's not safe to travel through. And you're the best judge on what is safe, because that really depends on your skill level and experience.
Yeah, yeah. So that graph on the left is a big chunk of California. If you're thinking about the photo, that's the High Sierra. I think we're looking at Sequoia National Park right there. And that's the southern one of those graphs, or the lowest at the bottom. So pretty light, but like Beth was saying, March is a big snow month. So we'll see how it goes. And it depends a whole lot on when you choose to cross these places. So some of you are starting very early in the year. Even like March 1st or before, and that's wintertime, right? So if you're starting that early, be prepared for Southern California snow travel. Don't be fooled by the desert. The PCT crosses high peaks in Southern California really pretty soon. Like we said, you could get snow. My coworkers will turn the lights on. There we go. Sorry about that. I think everyone's like, go home. It's late.
Or we're in the dark.
Yeah. So don't be fooled by the desert. Yeah, Southern California, you're in the Sky Islands, you're in these big peaks. So you're going to be climbing up to 7, 8, 9, 10,000 feet, and then dropping down, usually crossing an interstate. You're in the desert and then climbing back up into these mountains, and those mountains have snow. So snow travel, if you're early this year, or if you're a southbounder and you're early, the risks are serious. This is mountaineering. You can look at any of the trip reports from class of 2019. I want you to think conservatively, know that in the high peaks, throughout the Western United States, May and June are generally hazardous times to be in the mountains. The photo, Karen Wang's photo, is of the chute on Forester. That's a famous steep slope. It's really steep. If you're there early in the year, a fall on that slope would be, probably fatal. Definitely a serious injury. And it's not just those falls, right? Backpackers do die because of accidental falls. That's how we die by accidents in the backcountry, that and drowning. But also twisting stuff, breaking bones, getting lost in the snow, hidden danger of snow bridges. A snow bridge is snow covering a creek. You think it's stable. It might not be, right? 100% of snow bridges break every year. And if you're on that bridge when it breaks, it might well end up that you're now trapped in a dark tunnel in a raging creek, pushing you further down. So the dangers of snow are numerous, and please don't underestimate them. PCT is serious business. The other thing, and again, because the Sierra snow situation is light, this is mostly for people who are very early in the year. Just because the snowpack is light doesn't mean that snow melt won't be aggressive and dangerous during peak melt. And if you're out there in early season, and I can't name the date, nobody knows, May definitely is early season. Drowning is really a big danger. So I want you to get up on PCTA.org and read our stream crossing safety information. It's too detailed to go into here, but look downstream, consider what happens if you get swept away. Be aware of strainers, that log there, if those guys got swept into that log. The water goes through, but traps their body and pushes them down. It's an easy way to drown. Be careful crossing logs. One of my good friends just broke her back 3 weeks ago now, crossing a log on a hike. And she's very experienced. And yeah, the time to make a safety call is on shore. It's not when you're perilously in the middle of the creek yelling to your friends, please come help me. Do those risk assessments.
So Jack, one of the things I was thinking about is that this picture really depicts the individual PCT hiker. You got two folks crossing a stream that looks pretty broad and challenging. Y'all need to be thinking about being a community as you cross these creeks and really using good stream crossing with multiple people. There's been some dramatic videos. I mean, that's the cool thing about the age that we live in, is that you can actually Google and query. But there's also been some stream crossings that have been videotaped that are clearly not safe. And the Sequoia Kings National Park superintendent has asked me specifically to reach out to you all and really remind you that these waters are, if you're crossing something that's waist high and it's ice cold and wide and uneven territory, we have had people drown recently, not a long time ago, recently. And so the more that you can do to minimize that risk, which may include avoiding the crossing, is a really important thing to do.
Yeah, that's a good thing to bring up, that the rangers who live out there, their bosses are deeply concerned about what PCT through hikers and section hikers are doing, right? They're dealing with too many incidents, too many injuries, too many near misses, and each one is tragic. And a lot of them really starts raising bigger flags of concern. And those flags are waving, and they're directed at you all, right? Be safe and leave no trace is our message. Yep. So, sort of seeing that it's a relatively dry year. Last year, we didn't have a lot of wildfires that impacted the PCT, but there were really seriously destructive wildfires elsewhere. And this makes it hard for me to sleep at night when I think about you all out there. Take wildfire seriously. It's a fact of life, and it's an increasing problem on the PCT throughout the West, throughout the world. These fires are life-threatening events. Take heed and act accordingly. Obey those fire closures, but know that you might be dealing with a fire before firefighters know about it. You need to trust your gut and not wait for an official closure to act. Okay. I've experienced days where we learn of 10 or more wildfires within a couple of hours affecting the PCT. There are lightning storms that pass through that start hundreds of fires in an hour, right? These are emergency situations. Now, Beth, I'd love for you to chime in a little bit more about the risk of wildfire, because you've got some personal family experience with it, and Forest Service is just very involved in fire.
So I was thinking and reflecting as we've been talking that we've got the lions, tigers, bears, fires, floods. You know, the PCT is a great trail, and you all will have a fabulous experience. The theme that we really want you to take from this, because we've only got this short time together, is that you have to be aware of your surroundings, and you can't assume that it's safe from an environmental or a social standpoint just because you're on the PCT. My experience with the fire on the Plumas National Forest was, I thought folks knew where I was because I had called the day before. And I walked into wildfire that I couldn't get out of. I fled the way that I thought I should and found a campground that had been evacuated. So I was the last person left on that mountain. And what I was really angry about was that I had seen that plume for days, and I had not used my own good judgment to know that I should not be walking towards it any further. I let the desire to get to the Feather River be greater than my desire to make. I could have gotten out at Bucks Lake, and I did not. I went back in. And so I think it was 2 years ago, we told everyone just to avoid the state of Oregon that there was no safe passage. That's unprecedented. A lot of California has burned, and so I hope that means that the remaining landscape is mosaic enough that it'll be resilient. But if we enter into another drought period, which we may, it's really hard to know what and where the fire danger is. We're going to talk a little bit later about how you all can help us with preventing fires. That's a really important piece of this. But in terms of wildfires, really looking at those plumes, thinking about the wind. The thing that I didn't know that I wish I had known was that unlike the places that I grew up on the East, or even in Colorado, where rivers can usually stop fires, these narrow canyons that are in the West, the far West, fires just jump the river. It happens overnight. It happens in the afternoon as things heat up. So don't think that because you've got a river between you and the fire, you're safe. It will jump if the wind's blowing hard enough. Y'all have seen the towns that have burned down, with Paradise most recently, but we've had multiple communities that have been really impacted by fire.
Yeah, thanks for that. Burn area safety, everything's looser than you think, meaning stuff can fall, rocks can roll, holes, you can fall into them. I want to take a moment to just think about a thru hiker, Finn Bastian, his trail name's Colors, who passed away on his thru hike last year in southern Washington. He was hit by a falling tree. I'm not sure if it was related to a wildfire or just the tree mortality crisis, pine bark beetles and the drought have killed millions and millions of trees. So yeah, thinking about Finn right now. So trip and communications plans. At PCTA, we get a fair number of phone calls from worried family members. I want you, before you leave, to talk to your support people about what your plan is and educate them a little bit about what you're doing and where you're going and how often you plan to be in touch with them and what they should do if they don't hear from you. So your emergency contact should know that they're your emergency contact. And then you need to leave a trip plan and stick with it. Tragically, there's been multiple PCT hikers who have disappeared on the PCT and have not been found yet. And searchers would have been, it would have been a good thing if there was more information about where they were and when. And the search would have started earlier if family knew when they were past due. So I know that today you're probably not going to accurately forecast when you get to Mount Jefferson up in Oregon. But about 2 weeks before, when you're calling your family, you can give them a forecast of, I will be in Cascade Locks on this day. And if I don't call you on that day, that's when you should consider calling the sheriff, search and rescue, all of that. So they should also know details like your trail name. If you meet people or have hiking partners, tell your family your hiking partner's real name, their phone number, their mother's phone number. PCT is risky, and do this communications plan and trip plan, please.
So I think that this is a great slide to start the conversation about safety on the trail from a social standpoint. So trail angels are self-designated. There are some of the most fabulous human beings you will ever meet that are trail angels. We so appreciate the kindness of strangers. It is one of the things that I took from my AT hike that has carried me through, is the ability for me to ask for help and to receive it from a stranger was new. I had never experienced that in my life, and you will experience it repeatedly. But the theme through this presentation has been be vigilant about your safety. And that includes from a social standpoint. There's no screening of trail angels. I get phone calls every once in a while from folks who will be complaining about a living situation that they got into as they stayed in town, but with a quote unquote trail angel. And it was scary for one reason or another, or there was too much drug use at that place. And they want me to do something about that. It's in town. That is a police department, sheriff responsibility. I don't control, and we can't label people as safe or not safe. And so being smart about where you stay, who you talk to, listen to your little voice. If it tells you that something's not right, the easiest, best thing to do is just leave. Leave, make sure that you're with folks that you trust, and don't be blind in that trust. I can tell you that in all of my thousands of hours on the trails, so both the AT and the PCT, I've only had one incident. But it was a bad incident, and it was in town. So when my friends say, are you really doing this? Aren't you afraid of the bears? I'm like, no, I'm not afraid of the bears, But the human factor, as you get closer to towns, as you get closer to roads, is something that we need to be very vigilant on and thoughtful about. In terms of, so I hinted that, town problems, police problems, you really need to call 911. That's not something that you should be calling PCTA about initially. If it's an emergency and you need help, getting it from the police or the sheriff's department is the right venue. We also have online on PCTA's website a PCT incident report, and that is for non-emergency things where you can document situations that you've seen that needed addressing. So it could be something as simple as, a lot of litter someplace, or a car that's abandoned, or it could be an illegal use on the trail of some sort. But if you've got any situation that is threatening to you personally, number one, get out of it. And number two, please report it to the police department or the sheriff's department first, of whatever county you were in, and then let us know about it afterwards.
Thank you. You guys are eyes and ears for us.
Oh, the PCT is so popular. It is.
It's great.
And it is a great problem to have. So you all know about the book and the movie Wild, and it is true that we certainly have seen a steady increase in use on the PCT. There is nothing better than having people love our trail. And so as we figure out how to make sure that people are having a good experience and that we're not negatively impacting this resource that we love, we really do ask for your help in that. So as you travel, the decisions you make are a piece of that. And there's lots of tentacles to actions that you take that could minimize impacts. So campsites, the number of campsites and the number of people camped at campsites, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about poop and the problems with human waste and not proper waste disposal. So we'll talk a little bit more about that, but human waste, campsites, food and garbage in the backcountry, these are our collective problems that we really do need to work together to resolve.
So this is an announcement. You all are the first to hear about this new PCT Leave No Trace hang tag that we've created for you. It's a keepsake, and it's a way to increase Leave No Trace ethics on the trail, right? We're trying all the tactics, webinars, in-person education, all of it. So these hang tags are yours. They can only be obtained in person, and they are only for long distance permit holders. If you are starting down at the southern terminus, the terminus host will have them, and we're still not quite ready to announce the other places you'll be able to get them, but they're pretty cool, and it's our gift to you to hang off your backpack, and hopefully you can recognize other long distance hikers by carrying this hang tag around, and we hope it increases Leave No Trace and you all feeling like you're stewards of the trail.
Hey, Jack, do you want to show them or talk a little bit about the blank space on the 2020 side?
Yeah, so that blank space is to Sharpie in your trail name and your permit ID number, so that when you get to a visitor use management trail register somewhere else and you're asked for your permit ID number, you can just write it on in there. And trail name is perfect for it too. And you can have your friends sign the thing around the border. You can tie-dye it if you can figure out how to tie-dye plastic. You guys are super creative, and PCT through hikers are just, you're going to run with it, I think. So leave no trace in towns. We're going to have to blast through some of these. Be extra nice always. Some of these towns are really pretty small. They've been host to the trail and hikers and horseback riders for decades, right? This is an important part of their lives, important part of their businesses. And we want you to have a cultural exchange with these people that's really positive, right? So knowing that there's a ton of stinky shoes and trash and all that, and can you imagine your neighborhood where you live being host to 5,000 stinky shoes and hikers who take up space and want to plug in their devices and all that? It's got upsides, but it can also be little microaggressions that can sort of grate on people. So be respectful. A lot of this is common sense. At this point, as much as you can help others, your fellow long distance hikers, know how to do the right thing. You know, speak up if you see somebody getting drunk, or if you see somebody leaving trash behind, or illegally camping in the middle of town. It's not okay, right? It's not the experience that PCT should be for these towns. So thanks for leaving no trace there as well.
So this is a pretty simple slide, and the words speak the message we want you to understand is don't be building new sites, please. Camp in existing sites. There are way too many sites, more sites than we need. The thing to know about campsite selection is that if you put a whole bunch of people on a small site, the trampling of the vegetation can, if it's on a non-resistant site, after a few passes, that vegetation can die if it's not resistant and resilient. So picking an existing site that is hardened, so if it's on sand or if it's on rock or granite, or some grasses are resilient, is a really important thing. And then the reason not to camp near the trail or water, not near the trail, is that both people and wildlife use the trail as corridors. So you're in the way if you're on the trail. And water is also used by wildlife. And so especially in these places where water is limited, if you choose to camp right near water, you may be keeping the wildlife from being able to access it.
Yeah, thanks. Campfires. So no campfires in Southern California, please. It is not appropriate. It's illegal. If you see a rock fire ring in the backcountry, it shouldn't be used in Southern California. Shouldn't be used during a red flag warning or a fire ban. You're probably not going to know when there's a red flag warning, but that's wind, right? Dry plus wind. They issue these warnings that say, hey, today it's high fire risk. Don't have a fire. So please don't have a fire in SoCal, even if you see a fire ring, unless you're in like a campground and you know for sure that that metal barbecue pit is currently legal to have a fire. Then the other thing is, because it's a relatively dry year, it's quite likely that the local agencies, the forests like Lassen National Forest, will come June issue a restriction on campfires and other activities, smoking outside, power tools, things like that. You're going to be crossing so many jurisdictional boundaries that you might not know when you cross those boundaries, but know that it's quite likely that you will hear of fire bans spreading up the whole trail. And if that happens this year, that's should be a signal to you that no more campfires the rest of your hike, unless you know for sure that you're in a place that allows it, it's sustainable, it's appropriate. 90% of wildfires are started by people, So if you ever do have a fire, make sure you drown it with water, put it dead out. It is so common to have abandoned fire rings on the PCT that are still burning. I think that some of the people watching this, you will come hiking along and see a fire ring that's still smoldering. We hear it from firefighters, we hear it from thru hikers. It's critical. You need to put it out with water. You need to touch the coals to make sure that those are cool and dead out.
So just one more thing quickly, alcohol stoves or any kind of stove that doesn't contain the fuel, they catch wind. And when they catch wind, they spill their fuel. And so it is true that we've had wildfires started by well-intended ultralight backpackers who were using those types of stoves. So that's a fact. It's also true that when campfires start to be restricted, you are likely to see restrictions for any type of stove that doesn't contain the fuel or have a shutoff valve. So those are two things to really be aware of and to make sure that you're planning your cooking so that you can adapt as need be.
I've switched to a canister stove that you screw in the canister. Those canisters are widely available. They're by far the most popular type of stove. They don't spill fuel if it turns over, and they've got a way to shut it off. All of the alcohol stoves out there, even if they've got some particular workaround, don't meet the intention or the letter of those restrictions.
Okay, protect your food or protect the animals, right? So which is it? Sometimes folks think that they need to protect their food, but the problem with that is that we've got bears and other animals that are getting habituated because of it. And so it's really much bigger than you and me. It's an entire wildlife community that can be impacted by poor decisions. And so good food storage, not just to protect your food, but also to protect the bears and the other animals that could be easily habituated to food, is really essential. Frankly, I think that bear canisters are the way to go. If you saw me try to throw a decent counterbalance, you would know that it really does make sense for me to carry that canister. And when I was in Lassen Volcanic National Park is one of the places that's required for a canister. And so is all of Yosemite, the Humboldt, Toyabe, Sierra, Sequoia Kings National Park, Inyo National Forest. There's all a bunch of places in the Southern Sierra that you're required to have bear canister. But here's the deal. Just because you're in those places, the bears don't know that they've crossed an administrative boundary. And so being a good citizen of the universe, protecting those animals in a way that your food is safe is a really important thing to do. I know that some people think that sleeping with their food is okay. It all sounds fine until a bear has ripped into your tent or tried to get the food from you. And so this is one of these things that it's be smart, not just to protect your food, but it's really investing in protecting these wild ecosystems so that the animals that live in it can be safe. So Jack, do you have anything that you'd like to add to that?
So one thing is a place where bear canister is not required is Desolation Wilderness in the Tahoe area. And it seems to have far and away the most bear problems right now. And when I say bear problems, it's people problems, right? It's that on the PCT, bears are getting your food in desolation wilderness. So this is my home wilderness. I go here all the time. I for sure carry a bear canister in desolation wilderness. I think you should also. And one of the questions we got before the webinar, I'll just address really quickly right now, is especially in Southern California, should you carry a bear canister? I mean, I will echo Beth that it's kind of the right thing to do. It's convenient, all that. Encourage you to carry a bear canister. There are some problem food-seeking bears in Southern California that go after PCT hikers' food. They're in pretty specific spots. Another way to go about it is an earth sack or a rat sack. A lot of the risk in desert environments is from rodents and smaller animals like raccoons. So if you're protecting in an earth sack or doing depending if you're in a true desert, a lazy hang, something that's 4 feet off the ground, that's high enough to get away from the rodents, those techniques can be appropriate depending on the place. But as a long distance hiker, you will be passing through places where that's not enough. Poop. Yeah, so gosh, it's disgusting. We talk about poop all the time at PCTA, and I just hope that you all start being more responsible with this. Right now, that looks like you carrying out your toilet paper. There are too many people starting at the southern terminus, all using the same spots to go to the bathroom, that the toilet paper isn't decomposing. It's all up on the surface. I want to encourage you to try not to defecate at campsites. People are using those same campsites for months on end, and everyone walks the same 200 feet away to the same spot pretty much. And there's a ring of poop around the campsite. So if you can go during the middle of the day or 45 minutes after you leave camp, that's better. Please, in Southern California, don't go in the dry washes. Those creeks that don't currently have water in them, sandy bottoms, no bushes, easy digging, right? But in a wet year, even after a thunderstorm passes through, all of a sudden that creek is flowing and is your hiker friend's water source. So all the creeks out there, unfortunately, you better treat them, because I would put money that somebody has pooped in that dry stream bed, and that's gross. So dig holes that are deep, carry a real shovel, they don't weigh anything, carry out your toilet paper. Don't just roll a rock over and poop under the rock. Our volunteers pick up those rocks to build the trail. The trail is really built with boulders. Please help turn the tide of this problem. I know that I will get emails from you all complaining about the poop situation and asking me to do something about it. Here I am saying it's on you. You do better with this, please.
And we're talking about it, which isn't easy either. Part of it is the ecosystem. And so if you all have traveled in places that there's a lot more rain, things decompose faster. But especially in Southern California, we've said it multiple times now, it's desert country. It's not going to break down enough. You really do need to do as Jack has instructed.
Same with high elevation environments, right? John Muir Trail section of PCT, a lot of granitic soil, doesn't decompose all that well. Okay, I'm gonna start speeding this up for the last couple of slides. Thanks for hanging tight with us. We'll get to your questions. So PCT closures, this is really important. You need to check pcta.org/closures now and over and over and over through your hike. It's the official source of information. Right now, we've got two really sort of notable ones up. This Desert Divide rock fall, that's likely before you get to Idlewild. So between Pines to Palms and Idlewild, mile 160-ish, there is a large rock that has fallen off the mountain, and it's fallen on the trail, and some people are going around it, and it's dangerous, right? It's a sheer drop.
Yeah.
We don't know the stability of that boulder. It's definitely, if you're an equestrian listening to this, it's not appropriate for equestrians. And for many of you, it's not going to be within your comfort level, and you should consider not doing it. It is technically open, though. And I know that the Forest Service is trying to resource getting a crew out there to fix the problem.
We're going to have to blast it. So it's so big that that's really the only option. So it's getting the right skills in place to get it removed.
So the other one is the endangered species closure has been in place for many years up on Angeles National Forest. And my point is check for new ones because they happen at any moment, and it might or might not have tape across the trail. Do you want to chime in on anything?
Sure. So it's closed on the Angeles National Forest for mountain yellow-legged frog. So the Forest Service has been working with the Fish and Wildlife Service and doing some environmental analysis, and hopefully we'll be able to address it differently soon. But in the interim, it's really important that hikers and equestrians comply with the closure. One of the very cool things I like about working with PCTA is that they can provide real-time updates on things that are going on in the trail. Sometimes it takes the Forest Service or the other land management agencies a little bit of time before we can get our closures posted on our federal websites. So you need to know that Jack and I work really closely together as events are happening. And so many times PCTA will, number one, be the first to let me know something's going on. And two, they'll also be the first to be able to communicate to you all where there's a problem. So if it's in the situation where the forest website doesn't have the closure up, but PCTA has posted it, you can be assured that we have worked together and that the forest closure is indeed coming. It may just not have made it up to the website yet. So please do use that tool as a really good way for you all to know real time what the evolving situation is. So it could be an environmental closure, it could be a wildlife closure, fire closure. We've had a lot of different opportunities to think outside the box.
Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna put a plug into the low stress method of getting food and stuff on the PCT is buying from our local communities. These stores are used to PCT hikers. They stock supplies for you. Most of the trail, it's a great option for most people to just buy as you go and then plan a couple of weeks ahead that if you're entering Oregon, let's say, some of the places you're going to want to mail packages to, and you can just do that from an on-trail town and mail ahead. It helps support our local towns. It's a benefit of the trail, right? It's the impact that you all have on the livelihood of these businesses. And also because there's so many of you, it's kind of hard to store a lot of packages. So consider buying and supporting these businesses. There are some location changes. I do want to thank the Softleys and the Andersons and the Hiker Hut for years and years of service and kindness and generosity to PCT hikers. And thanks for your years. Gear talk, really kind of short shrift on this. Be prepared, of course. If you have a really heavy backpack at the beginning, you should probably look at what's in your pack pretty closely, because 40 pounds of equipment is just ridiculously hard to carry all day, every day. And with that, if you already have enough and appropriate equipment and you're considering upgrading, you might hold off a little bit and get out there with what you have and see what other people have and see what your needs are before you spend that last $2,000 before the start of your hike. Long distance hiking gets expensive, and a common mistake is in this research phase, we're all very tempted to upgrade to the latest and greatest. And it's good to have the latest and greatest, but you don't need to do that now. Some of you could probably save your pocket change, and in week 2, when you decide that you really do need a new set of trekking poles, that's when you can spend the money and upgrade and buy it from a local trail town and do all that good stuff. Treating your water needs to be called out, because our partners that run search and rescue and the land management agencies are concerned with PCT hikers getting sick. You all are getting belly aches and norovirus and giardia and sick in lots of different ways. And it's a serious problem for your hike and your experience, but also when it happens in the backcountry. So please wash your hands and treat water. There was a permit change this year relating to skipping the Sierra. Let's talk about it.
So it's, you choose your route and you have your hike based on your abilities. And if you get into the Sierras and you need to skip, it's really important that you know that you can and you should. So that's the thing that I want to leave home with you, is if you need to skip the Sierras for whatever the reason, you should. But when you come back, you must get a locally issued permit. And that is the kind of the nuance that people didn't understand. And we've certainly worked with the forests and parks to try to clarify. And there's a really simple reason for why. The why when you come back is you almost always come back in August, which is peak season in the High Sierra. And so what we've seen is a filling of the permits from people doing the John Muir Trail that are really in contrast. And then if you have a the first month of PCT hikers coming back at the same time, it's just too many people in one place. So the good news is that there are walk-in permits available, and our local units do believe that they'll be able to satisfy the demand as you return. But just know that you're going to have, if you skip, you're going to have a locally issued permit. The permit that you have remains valid going north, so there's no problems with that. And then you must travel through the Southern Sierra in 35 days. And the important thing to know about that is we've had people use the PCT long distance permit improperly. And I know that really surprises some of you, because I read all of, not all, some of what is online as well. But the 35 days is so that you're not using a PCT long distance permit improperly to just hike the High Sierra all summer. And that is the reason why. And we really do believe that it's sufficient time for you to get through in a reasonable manner. If there's an issue that you can't meet that 35-day limit, then you would still need to get a locally issued permit. We can't authorize you for anything beyond the 35 days.
Yeah, you've obtained a long distance permit to go hike a long ways, and you got to keep going. It's the short of it. So this was both born of a question that came in and something I've experienced. the universal struggle with our feet. When I thru hiked, everyone was talking about lightning storms and lack of water and resupply. And weirdly, nobody had mentioned in my research how it's hard on our feet to walk 2,650 miles. And yet when I was out there, and still to this day, generations of PCT hikers experience foot pain and foot injuries and overuse injuries that extend up the leg and involve the hips and back and all of this. And it's hard to watch. It's hard to know that we are so driven to experience the Pacific Crest Trail that it's really common that many of you are hiking through pain and injury and getting so injured that you have to quit. So what I want to help normalize is that you should talk about it, be honest with yourself, take time off, rest, change your footwear, wear boots if running shoes aren't working for you, mix it up. Don't push so hard that you walk until your feet are broken. It's too common, right? Many people have to quit because they just walked too much, too fast. And please be careful, especially with your feet. Know that, gosh, I'm out there, and at mile 40, it seems like people are starting to be injured in large numbers. And by mile 400, those people are still going, some of them, and still walking on injuries. And by mile 1600, they're now severely injured. So overuse injuries and that struggle with our feet, please, I'm not a podiatrist, I'm not a medical practitioner, I'm just a hiker. But take it seriously and treat yourself well. Remember that you're out there for the spiritual, the emotional, the physical reasons, and that doesn't need to involve injury. So we have a bunch of questions that came in before, and I think my coworker might sneak in with some of the questions that have been appearing on the screen. One was information. Oh, here comes Cassidy. Cassidy, come on in and introduce yourself.
Hi there. I don't know if I'm actually on camera, but hi, I'm Cassidy. I'm the Trail Information Assistant here at the PCTA. Through hiked in 2018. It's absolutely amazing. If any of you have called with questions, I might be the person to talk to answer them. And I've got some more questions now. I'm going to hand to Jack.
Oh, we have so many questions. Love that people are watching. Yay! Oh,
I'm going to
so
go get back
great.
to answering the other ones in the chat.
Okay.
too.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we've got a lot of questions about why we're not allowed to flip-flop anymore and why the changes are made. So one piece of this is the change to the long distance permit applies to the High Sierra, the Southern Sierra. So if you skip the Southern Sierra, then you need a local permit to hike in the Southern Sierra. But your permit remains valid north of Sonora Pass. And if right now, for class of 2020, there aren't other restrictions that pertain to the long distance permit. Please read the terms of your permit, okay? The terms of your permit is a document that you download before you print it. It's been shown to you a couple of times. And those are the terms of it. Now, rangers who are people like me, right? I would love to be a backcountry ranger. I'm sure many of you would love that job too. If they see real nonsense happening out there, they might have a conversation with you about, why are you here on this long distance permit when I just saw you 4 days ago and you've now set up camp or whatever. But anything else you want to say about flipping?
Sure. So we talked about it earlier in terms of not concentrating use in the Southern Sierra from a flip. But the meta message here is that permits are required in some places, and they have a quota tied to them. And so we really do need for you to comply with your start date and start location, because we're assuming a distribution from that start date. And we're actually working with researchers from Penn State and Virginia Tech to help us understand travel flow patterns and really project out how to minimize impacts. So the PCT is not the AT, it's not the CDT. It's different because we already have some very high use wilderness areas that are already under permit prior to when the PCT was designated. So we're working within those constraints.
So we got lots of questions about safety when hitchhiking, especially for young people and solo females. Gosh, we talked about the human factor a little bit, and I'd like to emphasize that you're probably most at risk when if you choose to hitchhike, right? If you're trying to get in a stranger's car, have your street smarts, right? That is a risky endeavor. So you can hike the PCT without ever getting in a car. You have to be strategic about which towns you visit. If you are in a place with a taxi cab, you can take a taxi, right, instead of hitching. Being with groups of people, right, you can wait. As tempting as it is to get into town, you might wait a couple hours for people to be with you. Safety advice for hitching is a little bit beyond the scope of what I'm super comfortable offering advice that isn't just purely caution. There's plenty of good advice on the internet about if somebody pulls up and they've been drinking, or they throw a flag, don't get in that car, right? Yeah, beyond that, walking into trail towns, not hitchhiking, having a support person come pick you up, having trusted people who some other hiker can refer and vouch for, yeah, this person I trust, using that. But anyone can stop to pick you up in that situation.
Yeah.
We also got asked about cell service on the trail, and do satellite phones work on the trail? So generally speaking, satellite phones work pretty much everywhere. It depends upon which satellite system it's used. I think Iridium is probably the strongest at this point. Cell service is extensive in Southern California, mostly non-existent for the rest of the trail. Something I want you to hear is that family members frequently get used to lots of contact in the backcountry, lots of phone calls from everywhere in Southern California, and then you all enter the Sierra Nevada and they panic because they're not hearing the daily phone call.
Jack, how about two-way texting with devices like InReach?
Yeah, so emergency devices like InReach. I think of what search and rescue thinks. And of course, there's lots of people in that world, but in general, it is a feature of modern technology, of the modern world. So I think it's pretty reasonable to carry an emergency beacon. Use it responsibly, okay? Make sure that if you set it off, you stay there. You stay and you talk to search and rescue when they come and arrive. Make sure you're not setting it off for less than true emergencies, threats to life or limb. These beacons are using up a lot of resources of volunteer search and rescue, right? These are volunteers that are coming out and picking you up. And if they bring you to an ambulance and you say, no, I don't need to get in that ambulance. I'm not really that hurt. It wasn't that much of an emergency. That's just a huge problem. These are new devices, relatively new devices, and the support, search and rescue, the managers are struggling with the problems that they create. But they also take the search out of search and rescue. They save lives. It's sort of a nuanced answer.
So, and it was an interesting question in that I was really thinking in terms of how to communicate with others if your cell phone's not working. So in a non-emergency situation, two-way texting can be a great way just to communicate, I'm okay, I'm running late, those kinds of things that a cell phone might not work at. But your answer was actually a better answer, and that we really do want you all to know that if you're using that emergency beacon as a safety valve so that you can do something a little more risky, that's not what they're intended for, and it's giving you a false sense of security, because that rescue is not going to be quick. It might be overnight. It might be the next day. It might be longer than that.
Could be multiple days if it's a snowstorm.
So if you're deciding to go up a snowy ridge a little bit further because you think you've got this emergency beacon that's going to save you if you really, really need help, I would argue that that's not good judgment on what the risk is. But certainly having it as a tool and a backup for a truly emergent situation is something that I would certainly consider if I was out.
So we're coming up on time. But this second one, COVID-19 or coronavirus, we've gotten, I think, at least 4 questions about it today.
Let me try, Jack.
Yeah.
I'll go quickly. So the U.S. Forest Service is probably not going to have any advice for PCT hikers on coronavirus. The Centers of Disease and Control are the U.S. government agency that's really posting all the information about travel, safety, and how to stay safe. So you all really just need to be aware and pay attention to whatever the CDC instructs in terms of travel and safety. But beyond that, I think we should move on.
Okay. Should we pick one last one? Somebody asked for information about the condition of Mission Creek. Mission Creek is in Southern California near Palm Springs and Cabazon. It had a massive flood that really annihilated the trail in this river canyon for many miles. And happy to report that a ton of work has gone into it.
So we've had volunteers and the American Conservation Experience working there.
Yep, ACEs, young people, core crews, hiring now if anyone wants to change plans and go work on the PCT. So a ton of effort has gone into it, but it will still be a problem spot, hard to navigate, lots of sticky branches, loose rocks, things like that. One last question. Travel to PCT days. Yeah, please do. It's in August. It's a great event. It is not timed perfectly for thru hikers. So really encourage alumni to come to that event. It's really a great community building event. How much cash to carry, very personal. It's good to have some cash. Most places take cards. I would say $200 maximum is plenty. And the risk of losing $200 is hopefully not that significant. I think that's it.
It's a lot. And so we know that there have been questions that we did not get to. And so as you've submitted them, when we have your contact information, we will get back. So maybe you could talk a little bit more about what that looks like.
Yeah, so we're always a resource. You met Cassidy and myself. We're real people at PCTA. You can email us, you can call us. Info@PCTA is one of the many ways to reach me. And here to answer your questions. We'll be following up in the next couple of days to answer any questions you have, and really anytime. Like to close out with just have a great time. PCT is truly special, and I hope to invite you to have a trail-friendly, impactful time. And when you're done, consider volunteering. Please become a member, maintain your membership, and thanks a lot.
And we love to hear your stories. So please do share in whatever way you're comfortable, because that's the inspiration for all of the volunteer work and all of the work that we do together. Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Have a great summer.